to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Today is July 18th, 2017, 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast. I want to thank you for joining us. I don't have a guest with us today. Someone rescheduled, and I just decided to leave it open so that I could update us on a lot of things that are going on. We have quite a bit happening in terms of nuclear liars and their big, gigantic stories. I don't know, many of you, I don't know if you've heard this, but TEPCO has announced that they are going to dump 1 billion with a B pounds of nuclear waste directly into the ocean. They've kind of backed off since they made that announcement, according to the Japanese Times. It's the Japan Times. That was dated 2 days ago, July 15th, 3 days ago. They've sort of backed off. The title of this story says, TEPCO backpedals after disaster reconstruction chief knocks plan to dump tritiated water into the sea. Yeah, they came out with a story last week trying to tell us that tritiated water is just not that bad, so don't worry about it. And actually, I think their logic is right because most of us are already drinking tritiated water in the United States anymore. We have got high levels. The reason they don't test our water is that we do have high levels of contamination. Most of us are probably aware of that. We have mercury, lead. I mean, we have all kinds of stuff in our water that's, quote, acceptable levels. And most of us can't go to the stream anymore and just drink water from the stream because if it's not radioactive, it's chemically poisoned. So the technologists have done an outstanding job of destroying our water supply. I thought I'd open the phone lines up. If anybody wants to give us a call, you can. The phone number is 717-817-8106. I'd love to hear your voice as well as mine on the air this morning. Otherwise, it's just going to be me reading to you. I have a whole series of stories that I'd like to share with you and ideas that are coming up. Let me repeat that phone number at 718-717-8106. If you're connected to me on Skype, my name is Lonnie.Clark7. You could connect with me there. I'm going to press ahead on this. This is a big story about them, although most of us Fuku fighters have been saying for years that they have likely been dumping massive amounts of this waste into the ocean. We know the double talk there is so mixed up. First, they said number 4 was listing and that it had tilted. This was 2014. It had already tilted 36 inches to the right, I suppose. They built that little box around it, and I guess I have no idea whether it's holding it up, but it's sinking. They built the ice wall. Remember the ice wall that they were going to build, drilling holes in the ice wall. The ice wall is an abject failure. It basically just turned into slush, and stories were that the foundations of the plant nearest it was kind of getting shaky, so they put that on hold. We've heard stories that the corium has left the building, so to speak. We pretty much know that for a fact. So most of everything they're telling us is just like made up bullshit, to be honest. Like they just say whatever they want. This business about them dumping the water, I think what they're going to do is, get rid of all those tanks. That's what they want to do because they're filling up the whole entire prefecture with tanks. That's not very good when you want to have people come there for the Olympics, is it? Oh, don't think so. Having people drive in over Japan and see miles and miles of tanks, probably not a good idea. So they got to keep going with the story that radioactive contamination doesn't really harm you all that much. So in fact, this story, can you believe this? TEPCO backpedals. This story, halfway through it, one of the sentences says, tritium typically poses little risk to human health unless ingested in high amounts. Well, actually, it's cumulative. It remains in filtered water as it is difficult to extract on an industrial basis. Ocean discharges of diluted volumes of tritium-tainted water are a routine part of nuclear power plant operations. That is very true. Go ask the people in New York. Although, let's take a look at the levels of bone marrow cancer, bone cancer, which it attaches to your bones. Tritium attaches to your bones. And to the high levels of mental disabilities for children in New York City, increasing as these nuclear power plants have been in operation. So we have a concerted effort, and frankly, not very many people really read this stuff. They just decide to move along, and we're not going to look at it. Why look? Because there's nothing we can do, right? Which is actually not true. I'm skipping down on this article because there's a few more articles I want to talk to you about, but this is what it says. Water injected to perpetually cool the damager reactors becomes tainted in the process. A high-tech filtering apparatus set up at the plant can remove 62 types of radioactive material, but not tritium. That's because it's H2 not H2O. As a result, tritiated water is building up continuously at the plant. As of July 6th, about 777,000 tons were stored in about 580 tanks on the premises. How do you like that? They can't tell us exactly how many tanks they have, and they can't tell us exactly how many tons they have, which, if you ask me, they ought to be able to precisely tell us how many tanks they have. Wow. And then, of course, they go on to tell us that it was on March 11th, it inundated it, causing the station blackout, and then a failure of the cooling systems of reactor 1, 2, and 3, and then led to triple core meltdown that became the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl in 1986. And it is ongoing, and it has not ended. Hence, the title of this show, The Age of Fission, Fission, because, I ought to write a little song about that. Fission, I think I will, actually. I did want to give us a bit of good news on Chris Busby's Facebook page. He wrote this, and I'm just going to read his post. He says, well, we won this one. This followed letters I wrote and were sent by me and the local group criticizing the project to dissolve fuel rods in acid and pump the resulting solution into the estuary. We required to let us have their environmental impact for radiation releases to the Blackwater. Blackwater is the plant, and their justification under the Euratom law. This wasn't an environmental impact statement for radiation, and there wasn't an environmental impact statement for radiation, and no justification decision. So they had to throw out the project. Here is their presser. Bradwell decides against further FED discharges into the Blackwater Estuary, MCZ. Text. The Nuclear Decommissioning Authority announced 21st of June 2017. The site of the former Bradwell Nuclear Power Station, the Blackwater Estuary in Essex, now has successfully dealt with all the fuel element debris, FED waste, and a major source of intermediate level radioactive waste at the Essex site. In a statement, this is an important step towards the site's planned closure as part of the NDA's mission to clean up and decommission the UK's earliest nuclear sites. Magnox Limited and its supply chain used innovative techniques and unique solutions to manage waste, which mainly consists of pieces of the magnesium alloy cladding that surrounds Magnox nuclear fuel. They dissolved the material in acid and explored new options for disposing of the waste. The result is the reduction in the hazards on the site and the shortening of the FED treatment project by more than a year. Well, more than a year, that's pretty good considering they have hundreds of thousands of years. They've saved 1 year. So now they only have 999,000 years to save it. How great of them. Nuclear Decommissioning Authority Executive David Peaty said, "This is another really important milestone and a huge step forward in cleaning up and decommissioning the UK's earliest nuclear sites. Finding new solutions and techniques to deal with radioactive waste is helping us to do things more quickly and efficiently, making our sites safer, sooner, and possibly the best value for the taxpayer. I would like to thank everyone involved in delivering this successful program. 65 tons of FED were treated in an on-site dissolution plant, which dissolved the waste in acid, separated the radioactive materials, and reduced the volume of the solid waste by more than 90%. Over half of the FED at Bradwell was reclassified as suitable for disposal as low-level waste." How do you love this? Low-level waste. It's still going to kill our children, but it's considered low-level waste. In the first-of-a-kind collaboration between Magnus Limited, the Low-Level Waste Repository Limited, and the specialist contractor Tradeby Inutech. More than 140 tons of FED have now been sent to Trade Inutech as LLW for treatment and eventual disposal at the low-level waste repository in West Cumbria, saving around 2 years of dissolution operations. Wow, 2 whole years. These people are completely insane. I mean, honestly, they are completely off their rockers. They have no regard for human life whatsoever. So I want to bring you back home, closer to where we live, and this is quite interesting. This is dated July 13th, 2017. Of course, it's an RT, the commie station. But it's actually taken from Reuters, so I guess, this is posted on RT, but it says Reuters is its storyline from. Fracking waste contaminates Pennsylvania watershed with radioactive material. Wow. Fracking, folks, radioactive material. The secret ingredient that old Dick Cheney didn't want anybody to know about. I really hope that there is a hell, honest to God. Stream sediments in Pennsylvania downstream from two fracking wastewater treatment facilities were found to contain radioactive materials and carcinogens, according to study scientists at Penn State, Colorado State, and Dartmouth University. 3 universities, folks. The study's finding, published Thursday, came after Penn State's Bill Burgos and his fellow scientists sought to discover what had been the effect of the strategy of treating and releasing fracking wastewater. They sampled sediments and groundwater from the Conemaugh River water downstream from 2 facilities that were created to make the water used in the fracking process fit for release into the environment. Isotope ratios of 226 radium, 228 radium, and 87 strontium and 86 strontium identified that peak concentrations of radium and strontium were likely sourced from wastewaters that originated from the Marcellus Shale Formation, according to the watershed scale impacts for surface disposal of oil and gas wastewater in western Pennsylvania. That's the name of the study. Watershed scale impacts for surface waste disposal of oil and gas wastewater in western Pennsylvania. Wow, this is an aside, but this is almost as if they had made an intentional decision to spread radioactive contamination as far as they could in our country. They have been fracking everywhere in our country, everywhere. In fact, they're breaking up our entire continent with fracking. And every place where this stuff leaks out, we are going to be seeing radioactive contamination. You think it was bad before from the World War II testing? These people are completely insane. Honestly, I don't know how people don't just like spit nails and get active. I just don't, it's just beyond comprehension to me. Their analysis detected peak concentrations of radium, chloride, barium, strontium, radium, and organic compounds in Conemaugh River watershed. The 2 major classes of organic contaminants included nonylphenyl ethyl oxalates, endocrine disrupting chemicals, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, also known as carcinogens. Wow. Endocrine disrupting chemicals and carcinogens. That, you know, I'm sick of feeling punched in the face all the time as an American. This is so outrageous. When scientists examined steam sediments from Blacklick Creek, just downstream from one treatment plant, it was found to contain about 200 times the level of radium found upstream of the plant. The highest concentrations of radium was just 14% below the level at which it would have to be treated as radioactive waste in some U.S. states. Quote, despite several other sources of contaminants, such as coal bed methane, coal mine drainage, and flue gas desulfurization releases that can impact surface water quality, we document multiple lines of evidence that indicate the legacy of unconventional oil and gas wastewater disposal has impacted stream sediments and pore water, groundwater on a watershed scale, wrote Burgos in the studies published in the ACS's Journal of Environmental Science and Technology. The highest toxic concentrations coincided with sediment layers deposited 5 to 10 years ago during the peak period of fracking wastewater disposals, Burgos said. Elevated levels of radium were also found as far as 12 miles downstream of the treatment plants. The U.S. is experiencing an oil and gas boom from exploiting its natural resources through fracking, but in doing so, it is creating billions of gallons of wastewater that are hard to contain and hard to treat, and also highly toxic, I might add, and are going to kill our future, going to harm our children 4 to 8 generations is what Dr. Caldecott said when we see the real effects of nuclear contamination. Fracking involves forcing under high-pressure water and other substances, which can include radioactive ones, into cracks in porous rocks that contain fossil fuel. This makes me spit nails, folks. The report estimates that in 2015 there were 10,000 unconventional oil and gas wells in Marcellus Shale, which produced 1.7 billion gallons of wastewater. The facilities that collect the water provide only limited treatment before releasing it into the surface water, according to Science Daily. The Marcellus Shale is a geology seam which stretches from the southern New York to Virginia, and is claimed by the fossil fuel industry to have rich deposits of natural gas and oil. Burgos said risks posed by the pollutants in the sediment and groundwater are difficult to assess, and the watershed is not used as a public source of drinking water. Oh, literally, man, the F-bombs just want to fall out of my mouth right now. The potential risks associated with this contamination are unknown. That is a straight up lie. Straight up lie. Dr. Linus Pauling, Dr. John Goffman, Dr. Arthur Tamplin have completely, 100%, unequivocally proved the risk to human health by nuclear contamination. But they recommend tighter regulations of wastewater disposal could help environmental and human health. Elsewhere in Pennsylvania, 12 families in West Whiteland and I think it's Oakland Townships, AWCHLAN. Oakland Townships reported contaminated well water in Chester County, causing Sunoco Pipeline LP to temporarily halt constructions of its Marina East 2 pipeline last Friday. The Mariner East 2 pipeline will carry natural gas from Ohio and the Marcellus Shale fields to the terminal in Marcus Hook, Delaware County. Although most of the 350-mile pipeline is being built at a trench near the surface, Sunoco is using horizontal drilling methods to install the pipeline through densely populated areas of Chester and Delaware County. There's a little picture to the side, and I'm going to actually open this up in a minute. It says, Trump administration to overturn fracking controls on public land. Oh, how good of him. 5 families with contaminated water removed to local hotels after alerting the company and the EPA about the water problem. Other families were given filtration supplies and bottled water. Sunoco tested the private wells to determine if its horizontal drilling caused the murky water by introducing bentonite clay into the water supplies. Oh, listen to this sentence. Results of those tests have not been made available so far. We're not telling. Quote, our concern is to make sure that our residents have a permanent solution so that this doesn't occur, unquote, said George Turner, a township supervisor to the Republican Philadelphia Inquirer. That is hilarious. Too late, brother. It's way too late for that. Officials in West Whiteland are asking Sunoco to cover the cost of connecting a dozen homes to the public water system so that they no longer are affected by the company's drilling. Some residents don't favor the plan. If I have to hook up to city water, they should have to pay my water bills for the rest of my life, said Eckert, a homeowner, told the Philadelphia Inquirer. We had a perfectly good well. Well, not anymore, brother. Yeah, and I bet they all voted for Trumpy. Though you can't blame Trump for this fracking. That was all done by Obama, that's going to be his hidden legacy in 100 years. People are going to hate him for that. So, Trump administration to overturn fracking controls on public land. This was March 16th, 2017, so it's already been done, I suppose. Court filings indicate the EPA is on the verge of invalidating federal regulations on the fracking of public and tribal lands in order to make the rules mesh with President Donald Trump's agenda. On Wednesday, the U.S. Department of Justice announced they were considering overturning Obama's 2015 regulations regarding the mining of natural gas and crude oil via hydraulic fracking on public and tribal lands. This actually did get overturned, as a matter of fact, so they're full steam ahead. Well, we're super screwed, you guys. Like, seriously, we used to have a beautiful country, land of the free. We're actually not really. We didn't really ever have the land of the free. We had the land of the oppressed. If you weren't a white male, you were pretty much oppressed. A white landowning male. Let's just put it to you that way. Even that, even if you were white, you had no land, you were still oppressed. So here we go. The ecologist. This is another story that Dr. Chris Busby was talking about. Radioactive discharges into the sea. I think this is the one that they won where they're not being allowed to do it. So I'm going to move on. I really do want to talk to you about my pet peeve right now, folks. We only have a half an hour to cover this, but I want you to continue to knock on their doors and call your House of Representatives. Call them all. Call all the Republicans. Call all the Democrats. Call as many people as you can and tell them no on H.R. 3053 because this bill is going to be a disaster for our country if it allows it to happen. Let me see if I can find where it's at in the legislative process. See what happens. Related bills. Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 2017. It's been introduced. Let me see what actions is it on. Let's take a look at the actions. You can always, when you just type in these bills on the website, it's been introduced in the House. So that was on 626, but it has not made it to a legislative agenda. So we have no idea where it's at. Let's see. Ordered report, yeas and nays, 628. Ordered to be reported by the yeas and nays, 49-4. Wow. That's a pretty serious thing. I'm going to remind you what this bill does so that you can remember why we need to tell them no to this thing. The Shimkus H.R. 3053 Nuclear Waste Policy Amendment Act of 2017 preempts state, local water and air rights, federal water rights, and other rights. Preempts means takes away, means corporations have more rights than the federal government in regards to water. And it's probably just like what we just read, because guess what? They're going to be dumping it in the water. They're going to be dumping it in the water. And in fact, they are. They're kind of prepping us all. If you guys hadn't noticed, the common theme is here. They're sort of prepping us to accept that nuclear contamination is just the new way of life. We have to deal with the death, the mutations, the birth defects, the sterility, the schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is one of the things that constant exposure to low-level radiation causes first. Schizophrenia and diabetes. So I guess that's a win-win for the pharmaceutical industry, isn't it? I don't know. I have big issues with the pharmaceutical industry, and you know, the way that our government has been doing things is really antithetical to life. We have had a military coup, maybe since the very beginning, where people didn't matter. Obviously, we did nothing but move across the entire continent, murdering whole entire nations, forcing people to walk hundreds of miles in outrageous conditions. And right now we have, you know, on native reservations, we have uranium and fracking facilities going on. Most of the nuclear waste is being dumped on native lands. And they don't really have a choice. It's going there. They make a deal with a few of the heads of the chiefdoms and the super rich people within the tribes, and that's the way it goes. I do know that the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, CELDEF, is working with some native tribes, and they've been speaking to them about gaining community rights. Because at this point, the tribes have just as much power as we do as municipalities to stop this, which is zero. Until we get our community rights, until we pass amendments on our state constitutions and at our local level to get community rights, we have no legal right to tell these frackers we don't want them in our backyard. We don't have a legal right to tell the nuclear power facilities we don't want you in our backyard. They have a legal right for profit. Commerce has a legal right for profit. And until we get our community rights passed, and it's going to take us to go out and knock on doors and get active and use our spare time to try to save our environment. And that's where we're at. Pretty serious, you guys. We're in a pretty serious state. So I'm just going to keep moving on because there are lots of things to talk about. But if you guys want to give us a call, it's 718-717-8106. And I am just going to keep moving on. I wanted to read you something that Dr. Caldecott wrote on her Facebook page. You know how we are currently, the UN just passed this thing banning nuclear weapons, right? That they just said, no, we're not going to have nuclear weapons. Well, the United States is moving ahead, planning on nuclear war. That, frankly, with Trump, I don't know, being outed for his treason and his nepotism, he's probably more dangerous than ever right now. So Dr. Caldecott wrote this on June 29th. America cuts off its nuclear nose to spite its nuclear face. I am watching what's going on in the political realm in the U.S. with absolute amazement. There is a concerted effort to discredit Donald Trump because of his previous relationships with Russia. Actually, Dr. Caldecott, it's not to discredit him. He just has refused to tell us what the truth is. But surely we need a president who can liaison and negotiate with Russia as our lives depend entirely upon Russian policy and actions. True, except we cannot let them manipulate our elections, my dear. That's the bad part. Russians are not our enemies. However, it's not just meddling in our elections. It's cyber warfare in our elections. And I was no Clinton advocate, but the fact that Donald Trump is able to be manipulated by Russia, blackmailed by Russia, and every one of his people is filthy dirty with filthy money from Russia is an offense to me as an American. But I'm going to move on with what she says. Together, Russia and the U.S. own 94% of the 16,400 global nuclear weapons stockpile. North Korea could blow up a city, but only Russia and America can blow up the world. Did you know that there are at least 12 Russian hydrogen bombs targeted on New York City, LA, and most major U.S. cities? Towns of 50,000 or more are targeted with at least one bomb. Hey, that means Eugene, Oregon is targeted with at least one bomb. Canada, Japan, Australia, Europe, and England are similarly targeted, while U.S. targets China and Russia. Donald Trump is the only person in the U.S. with the authority to press the button. Not anymore, actually. I think that Congress has stopped that. They passed some type of a little bill that says he can't press the button without their authority. If the Strategic Air Command detects a Russian attack, Trump will only have 3 minutes to make a decision to destroy life on Earth. As of today, how's that for fear-mongering? Ooh! We actually have to rest our entire future on Donald Trump, except I do believe, and I don't have it cited here, but I do believe that Congress pretty quickly amended some of these regulations to say he has to take a little bit more time and has to get permission from other people. Although if you disagree with me and you know more about those details, you can call me at 718-717-8106. Back to Helen Caldicott's diatribe. As of today, 96% of Russian strategic missiles are ready for immediate launch. A bilateral nuclear exchange between the two nuclear superpowers could take a little over 1 hour to complete. Well, then we don't have that much anxiety, do we? Did you also know that the U.S. still has an official policy to fight and win a nuclear war? Let us examine the medical effects of such an event so we can understand the lunacy of this policy. A hydrogen bomb will land at 20 times the speed of sound and explode in the fraction of the millionth of a second with the heat of the sun. It will excavate a crater 3/4 of a mile wide and 800 feet deep, converting the buildings and millions of tons of earth below to pulverized radioactive injected into a mushroom cloud. 6 miles in all directions, every building destroyed, concrete and steel melt, every person killed, most vaporized. 20 miles in all directions, people are killed or lethally injured. Winds of 500 miles an hour turn humans into missiles traveling at hundreds of miles an hour who will then die from compound fractures and internal organs. The shock wave enters the nose and mouth, causing acute pneumothorax and ruptured lungs. Ugh. Windows will popcorn, producing shards of glass flying at hundreds of miles an hour, decapitating people and inducing severe lacerations. Everyone will be burnt, some vaporized, some charcoalized, some with third-degree burns. Sorry about this, folks. This does not make good for good morning coffee. Oops. Everyone will die, some immediately, some in a few days, in the most extraordinary agony, suffering from acute radiation sickness. I often visualize please don't visualize doing this. This is ridiculous. I often visualize people staggering around amongst the radioactive smoke wreckage looking for their vaporized children. Well, I hope she does not actually really do that. That's completely ridiculous to visualize that kind of scenario, Dr. Caldecott, because thoughts are things. I visualize us finding a solution. I visualize us neutralizing the radioactive contamination. I visualize us finding a way to live in peace with each other instead of war. I visualize a way where we have equity among all people. Back to Dr. Caldecott's fear-mongering. It's not really fear-mongering. This is kind of a little taste of reality. This is what would really happen. The U.S. federal government has stockpiled huge quantities of morphine. That makes me laugh. I'm sorry, but here, have some morphine while you've been radioactively nucleated and you're going to die anyways. The U.S. federal government has stockpiled huge quantities of morphine in case of nuclear war, but all hospitals will be destroyed and all doctors dead or injured. 40 miles from the epicenter, one glance at a flash will induce blindness from retinal burns. The whole area will be engulfed in a firestorm of 3,000 miles wide, a holocaust. A fallout shelter is useless because it becomes a crematorium as a fire consumes the oxygen and bakes the shelter. Now, apply that to the whole country, every city and every town. The Federation of American Scientists estimate that if nuclear attack occurs in summer, America will be consumed in fire coast to coast, north to south. And it could happen tonight or tomorrow by accident, design, or computer hacking. Millions of tons of smoke and soot will be injected into the stratosphere there to cover the earth with a cloud so thick that it will block out the sun for up to 10 years. Inducing a short ice age, and everyone and everything will freeze to death in the dark. It is clear that the majority of Americans and the media are practicing psychic numbing and maniac denial as they sleepwalk to Armageddon. Well, that's a pretty strong statement, don't you think? Sleepwalking to Armageddon. I don't think we're actually sleepwalking to Armageddon. I think that they're sort of running right into it by supporting this lunatic. You know, we are really seriously in a bad way, folks. And if people don't take it seriously, you will take it seriously. Because what we are experiencing now is what the Republicans wanted to do to us during Nixon's time. Only the American public said no to it then. And so they forced it on South America. It's Ellen Greenspan's neoliberal agenda. And it's quite clear. Alan Greenspan, in an effort to, he was really an elitist, and he believed that the world should be run by a few elite people who understood money and economics, and to hell with democracy. And it didn't, people at the bottom, the underclass, the people who didn't know, could not possibly make good decisions. So what we needed to do was destroy all the safety nets, take away public housing, take away public food assistance, take away public hospitals. How's that working in Venezuela? Take away the schools, public schools. Even take away the public army. Take away everything. Privatize everything. Give it to private corporations. And because people are going to resist this, because these types of programs cause massive poverty, you have to militarize the police. You have to have a police force that is numb to the needs of the people. So you have to brainwash, you have to train the police to look at the public as the enemy, which in fact they are currently being trained to do. We are often referred to as the enemy by the police departments. We are not considered one of them. We are considered the enemy, and we are considered it. The enemy is considered an it, not a he or she. And they just come in and destroy everything, and it causes such an upset, such massive poverty, that what happens is people will not accept that, and they begin to overthrow the government. Alan Greenspan had this all laid out. He knew that this would cause massive poverty. So basically, he said, 10 or 15 years later, the maximum they could hold on to power would be 10 or 12 years. And in fact, in Chile, it was 12 years. Pinochet held on to power for 12 years. He called it a controlled democracy where they only allowed the right people to run in the elections. You could vote for A or B, and that was it. And both of them were no change at all. Kind of like what we have right now in our elections. We had a choice of Trump or Clinton, which was really neither one. I mean, the only difference between Trump and Clinton is Trump is stupid. And he's a terrible businessman. He has no idea how to run government or how to run business. He's bankrupted so many times. I don't know what America was thinking. This guy's going to run us off the rails. Maybe that's why they wanted him in, so that they wouldn't have to blame the Clintons for the economy collapsing, because it's coming. And so people push back. And people want their democracies. They want to vote. They want to have, if you're going to have an organized, we either have anarchy or we have an organized government. And there's a big anarchist movement going on right now. People are like, screw government. What do we need that for? But people do organize. This is the thing. We do organize, even at a local level. I went to a community rights meeting last night, and Bonnie Bettman, who was our city councilor, has come up with a plan to create an independent city auditor. And there are, shockingly enough, there's only about 15 cities in the entire United States that have an independent city auditor. Right now, what we have, at least in Eugene, Oregon, is a very weak city council. Our city councilor people do not get paid. It's a non-paying position, so everybody has to work full time. Our city auditor, our quote city auditor, gives all these kinds of sweetheart deals to all kinds of things. The city of Eugene had a budget last year of $622 million. This year, it's $677 million. So they increased their budget through taxation, And the money that is being spent on projects and things like that all go through the, quote, city auditor's office. And the city council doesn't even have an ability to question the city auditor. The city council has to actually get permission. They have to have a majority vote to even ask a question of the city auditor. So they're starting a movement here in Eugene we're going to be knocking on doors again while we're looking for community rights petitions to get the independent city auditors commissioned, at least put on the ballot so we can vote on it. And this is where we're at. We're like, Americans have really been shocked, and I know I'm one of them, to realize that we all believed that we had a free and fair elections, that we had a responsive government, that really basically the people in power were really managing things to the benefit of the city or to the state or to the country. What we have now discovered is that that is the farthest thing from the truth. They are lining their own pockets with complete disregard to the environment and to human health. And it's because they're rich enough that they can buy themselves their own security. We saw that this week with John McCain went to the eye doctor, saw a blood clot in the back of his eye, and boom, immediately went to the doctor. That's because he had a premium health care plan. He didn't have to wait. He gets it all paid free on our tax dollars. And they're trying to shove a plan down our throats that harms even the weakest people. We have enough money to pay for the health care plan of every single senator and representative for the rest of their lives, by the way. You get elected to Congress, you get health care for the rest of your life. The rest of your life, you go in. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And for people who say, well, I don't want to have to pay for everybody's health care, really? Well, you're already paying. What we need is a reasonable Medicare for all. We need universal health care. We're the only so-called first world. And frankly, we're not first world. If anybody's traveled overseas, take a look at their rail stations. Take a look at their airplanes. Ours are an abomination. Ours are from the 50s. We have not upgraded our equipment, our roads, and frankly, it has come on the backs of the Republican Party who wants to privatize. They refuse to do any new actions unless we can privatize everything. And that's Trump's agenda. Let's just give it all to big business and let them privatize it all. It's going to cost the American government 5 times what it should, but let's just let them do it anyways because they know what they're doing, just like old Donald Trump. He knows what he's doing, right? Honestly, I find him to be just an abomination of a human being. I am shocked at how degraded this country has become. The addiction to hate, the addiction to self-hate, the addiction to, like, everything out there. Everything negative, everything that's in our Constitution. In fact, I think I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to pull up the preamble and read it to you guys. Because really, we have really forgotten. And we have forgotten lofty ideals in this country. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. So, look, one of the things that happens here is that we have really lost our way in terms of what it means. And it's not funny and it's not fun to ridicule people. It only harms every single entity. When you focus on the negative, you get back negative. When you focus on the positive, you get back positive. Part of why we have this nuclear disaster is all they have done is ignore it. They have chosen not. It is a specific intention not to find solutions, not to test our water, not to test for cancer, not to test for these things, because John Goffman did not give them the answers they wanted. In fact, he unequivocally proved that nuclear contamination is one of the worst things we have ever done to the human species and to our entire environment. It's such an outrage. It's so unbelievable that Americans have so little ethics, that they think it's okay to bully people. They think it's okay to call each other names, to make fun. We're just playing. That's not playing to make fun of people. It's not fun to ignore the harm that these people are doing in Pennsylvania, that what the frackers are doing. It's not fun to ignore Bill HR 3053 that's going to take our water rights away. I mean, this is such an outrageous offense to our country. I mean, they are doing absolutely nothing to help our country. They're going to eliminate environmental impact reports for nuclear waste. Nuclear waste could be coming to your town and you don't even know it. And guess what? Once you realize it's there, once you guys start getting sick and your kids, just like the people in St. Louis, I had on Wendy Lumetta from St. Louis yesterday. They grew up, St. Louis looks great. You can't smell it, taste it, or feel it. It looks fine. Everything looks fine. Until you're about 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, you start getting sick. You start having endocrine problems. You become a young person and you can't get pregnant. You start having headaches. I mean, it's outrageous, the absolute denial that people are in. You know, the goal of this show, that why I'm here 4 days a week, is to encourage people to change their minds, to change their attitudes, to embrace living, to embrace humanity. Instead of just ignoring it and stuffing chemicals down your throat, embrace life. We've been given a gift. That's why it's called the present. It's a present. Life is a gift. And we have a lot of ability and we have a lot of love. There's a lot of things that we can actually do. The more you open up your heart, the larger it gets, the more you actually grow and you allow others to grow around you. And that's what's being cut off daily by having to ignore this. Every day you ignore what you know you're supposed to do, you die a little bit. It's really important that we start embracing our responsibilities. I'll say I have about 8 minutes left. I actually have redone my introduction and the intro and outro, and I'm going to probably be sending those to Jules relatively soon this week. I don't know how soon she'll be able to get it all up. But, you know, part of what my new introduction says is, you know what? We really have a responsibility to change. It's up to us to make a difference. We are the ones that are going to make the future for our children. And we have the big red flags already coming up. Anybody listening to this radio station has been hearing about 3053, HR 3053. It's up to you to call your Republican congressman and say, I don't know what you're being told about it, but what we're being told is that it's going to eliminate authorization of Congress and other checks and balances, that Congress is no longer going to have oversight over the nuclear waste that's being done, that it's going to eliminate the priority of safety and environmental protection over cost and speed. So they can just choose to store their nuclear waste and build these nuclear facilities anywhere they want because it's cheaper. So you know what cheaper means? Cheaper means it's going to be done in poor communities. So we're just going to subject the poor communities to more death and destruction because, hey, it's not us. I don't know. I don't know how people can just sit idly by day after day. It's not that hard to just call your congressman. And frankly, I think we need more than just calling your congressman. We need people to go out and protest, post up videos, take pictures of yourself, post it to Instagram. You know, there's ways to engage with other organizations. Call them up and say, hey, why aren't you guys talking about nuclear waste? And frankly, you start talking about nuclear waste to say like Greenpeace or 350.org, they're going to look at you like, well, it's just not that bad. You've been radicalized. That's not true. These mega donor, mega nonprofits, they're getting big money from the nuclear industry to ignore all of this. And in fact, I just saw a story this morning on the Googles that talked about Illinois just lost its there was a case that was lost in Illinois for the nuclear. They were trying to stop the nuclear subsidies in Illinois, and a federal judge said, nope, you guys have not exhausted all of your legal rights. So the state of Illinois is still going to have to subsidize 2 leaking nuclear power plants. And there's also the same thing going on in New York because Indian Point is still leaking, folks. Indian Point is still leaking. So, we're so super screwed, honestly. And the only way we're going to get unscrewed is for us to deal with it ourselves. I mean, we actually have got no. Oh, and then this is the other thing they're trying to push down our throat, the small nuclear reactors. They could kickstart the stalled nuclear sector. And this is all because of the monster Bill Gates. Bill Gates is one of the biggest investors in there. So let me see this. This is about the, I'm going to read you the title. Nuclear competitors handed decisive court loss in Illinois. On Friday, District Court Judge Manish Shah handed a decisive victory for nuclear energy supporters and plant owners in a case that challenges Illinois' right to choose the mix of fuels used to produce power inside its borders. The plaintiffs opposed the Future Energy Jobs Act recently passed by the Illinois legislature and signed into the law. The statute awards zero-emission credits with 3 specific nuclear generating stations, 2 at the Quad City stations and 1 at Clinton. Both leaking, all of them leaking. The ZECs could be worth as much as $235 million each year. That additional revenue was designed to be sufficient to allow the owner, currently Exelon, to continue effectively operating the units despite unprofitably low prices at their respective power delivery points. This is so unreasonable. A provision of the law requires the computation of a price adjustment based on the realized wholesale prices over the course of the year. I'm going to skip down. Their filing sought to invalidate the ZEC's program, claiming that it's preempted by the Federal Power Act and that it violates the Dormant Commerce Clause. They also claim that the program denied that the equal protection of federal laws governing the wholesale electricity market in violation with the 14th Amendment. And I'm going to really skip down. It's quite a long article, but we only have like a minute and a half left. He basically says that the ZEC program falls within Illinois' reserved authority over generating facilities, and that the Federal Power Act does not preempt the state program under principles of the field preemption. So, once again, a major win for the nuclear industry, bada bing, That doesn't mean we can't keep pushing back. They're going to do this also with community rights, just as they did with suffrage, women's suffrage, and freeing the slaves. That does not mean that we're on the side of the right just because they keep winning. It is up to us to take some action and stop these people. I don't know how much we can stop them, but we certainly can push for new innovative solutions to the contamination that they refuse to face. Because pretty soon, that's all we're going to be having is nuclear waste industry, because at a certain point, we'll have so much we can't stop it. Put your courage feet on, you guys. We will be with you tomorrow. Heidi Lambert's going to join us. I'm super excited about interviewing her again. We really appreciate you joining our station. Share our channel with your friends and family, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.